The night before a wedding is supposed to be filled with nervous excitement. At least, that's what people say. Mine was different. It carried a weight that pressed against my chest like a stone I couldn't shift. Just when I thought I had tucked my past neatly behind me, it knocked, loud, insistent, impossible to ignore. It wasn't blackmail, not exactly. Neither was it force. It was something far stranger, more dangerous, an old promise. Years earlier, when I was still with Daniel, my first real love, we had believed we were unshakable. We whispered about futures that seemed carved in stone, a home, children, laughter echoing through rooms that didn't yet exist. We spoke with the kind of certainty that only the young can afford. But life has a way of mocking certainty. He left, opportunities pulled him elsewhere, and I eventually met Michael. And yet, before Daniel and I parted, we made a vow. At the time, it felt harmless, a joke even, though our voices were dead serious when we sealed it. If we ever meet again before you marry someone else, he had said, we'll share one last night, no matter what. I had nodded, and because we were young and reckless, we cut our palms and pressed them together, swearing it like it was some sacred ritual. It seemed impossible that such a day would ever come. But impossible has a strange way of sneaking up on you. Michael came into my life when Daniel was already gone, and for a while, I believed the universe had given me another chance at happiness. Michael was steady, thoughtful, the kind of man mothers pray their daughters will marry. With him, there were no dizzying highs or crashing lows, just a calm certainty. I convinced myself that was what real love should be, not fire, but warmth. Still, when I heard Daniel was back in the country just a day before my wedding, my chest tightened. It wasn't supposed to matter. I told myself I only wanted to see him to prove that I had moved on, maybe even invite him to the ceremony out of courtesy. That's what I told myself anyway. I went to his apartment that evening. A risky decision, perhaps foolish, but once the thought entered my mind, it grew roots. He opened the door, and for a second, time folded. The years we had spent apart collapsed into nothing, and it felt as though we were still those reckless young lovers who thought forever was theirs to hold. We talked for hours. About nothing, about everything. The things we lost, the people we became, the paths we had taken. Laughter slipped in between silences, heavy enough to drown me. And then the silence deepened, thickened. Hanging between us was the promise, the one we had once thought laughable. Neither of us spoke it aloud, but it was there. I could almost hear it breathing. I should have left. Truly, I should have stood up, smoothed down my dress, and walked out the door. But memory has claws, and Daniel's eyes, those familiar, haunting eyes, pulled me backward into a version of myself I thought I had buried. My mind whispered that it would only be closure, one last foolish mistake before I returned to Michael, who was likely praying for me at that very hour. Closure. That word has ruined more lives than betrayal itself. By the time I left Daniel's apartment, the weight of what I had done sat heavy inside me. I told myself it meant nothing, that tomorrow I would marry Michael, and we would begin our new life untouched by this single night. But even as I walked away, a small voice inside me whispered that some promises are never harmless, and some mistakes echo far louder than we expect. I didn't know it then, but that night, my night of weakness, would not stay buried. It would grow, it would take shape, and soon, it would demand a price far greater than I imagined. The wedding came and went in a blur. People said I looked radiant, glowing even, and perhaps I did, but it wasn't joy that lit my face. It was fear disguised as happiness. Every vow I spoke felt like a lie echoing in a sacred place. Michael stood across from me, eyes bright with devotion, and I wondered if he could hear my heart pounding like a guilty drum. If he sensed anything, he never said. That was the kind of man Michael was, trusting to a fault. He held my hand tightly through the ceremony, smiling with the certainty of someone who believed love, real love, could survive anything. And maybe it could. But could it survive me? The first few weeks of marriage passed smoothly. We settled into routines, morning prayers together, meals shared at the small dining table, laughter at little things. On the surface, we looked like every newlywed couple, full of promise and quiet joy. Yet beneath it, a shadow stretched across my soul. At night, when Michael slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying that night with Daniel. It is said the human mind has a way of making peace with itself, of softening sharp edges of guilt if you give it enough time. I hope mine would. I convinced myself it was a single mistake, a sealed chapter. No one needed to know. No one ever would. Then came the sickness. At first, I brushed it off as exhaustion. Marriage was new, responsibilities were different, and stress can play tricks on the body. But the nausea didn't fade. Instead, it grew. Morning after morning, I ran to the bathroom, the bitter taste of bile rising as my heart thumped with unspoken dread. Michael noticed, of course. He worried over me, insisting I see a doctor. I resisted at first, not out of stubbornness, but because deep down, I feared the truth. Still, his concern eventually wore me down. So one bright afternoon, I found myself sitting in a sterile hospital room, staring at a pregnancy test clutched in the doctor's hand. "It appears you are expecting," the doctor said, her voice even, professional, unaware that her words cracked open a cavern beneath my feet. I blinked, unable to speak. Expecting. The word echoed in my ears, a song both joyous and terrifying. My palms grew damp, my throat dry. A baby. I was carrying life inside me. But whose life was it? Michael's? Or Daniel's? The doctor went on about prenatal vitamins and appointments, her voice fading into the background. My thoughts spun like a storm, fragments of prayers mixing with fear. When I finally stepped out of the hospital into the sunlight, the world looked unchanged, but I was no longer the same. That evening, when Michael returned from work, I placed the test result in his hands. He read it once, then again, and his face broke into the kind of smile I hadn't seen before, pure, unfiltered joy. He pulled me into his arms, kissed my forehead, and whispered against my skin, "Our first child." His hands moved gently over my stomach, as though already protecting the life within. I forced a smile, my throat tightening. His excitement pierced me deeper than any accusation could have. He deserved this moment. He deserved truth, loyalty, trust. And yet, what I carried might not be his gift, but my betrayal. That night, I dreamed again. A faceless woman appeared, her voice heavy with judgment, asking, "Why did you give your child another man's name? Why lie to the one who loves you most?" I woke drenched in sweat, trembling, unable to shake her words. For weeks, I lived in that torment. By day, Michael doted on me, cooking meals, running errands, ensuring I rested. By night, I curled into myself, silently begging God for mercy. I wanted to believe the child was Michael's. I prayed for it, pleaded for it, clung to the faintest hope that timing was on my side. But the truth has a way of sharpening over time, and in my heart, I feared the answer. Every flutter of life in my womb reminded me of my failure. Michael would press his ear to my stomach, smiling as though he could already hear our baby's laughter. And I would nod, forcing joy into my voice while inside me, guilt spread like a sickness with no cure. The secret was safe for now. Yet secrets do not stay buried forever. The months crawled by, heavy with waiting. My belly swelled, and with it, the fear inside me. Michael counted each passing week with excitement, his hands lingering on my stomach as though he could feel every heartbeat. He spoke to the baby often, whispering prayers and promises. While I sat in silence, my heart caught between hope and dread. When the contractions finally came, it was in the dead of night. Michael rushed me to the hospital, his hands steady on the wheel, but his voice trembling with prayers. "Lord, keep her safe. Keep our baby safe." He said it over and over, like a chant. The pain was sharp, waves crashing over me, but my thoughts weren't on the pain. They were on the truth, on whether the baby's features would betray me the moment he entered the world. Hours later, the cry of a newborn filled the room. "A boy." The nurse placed him in my arms, his skin soft, his eyes blinking against the light. He was beautiful, so small, so perfect. My tears came, not from joy, but from the storm inside me. Michael entered, eyes wide, voice breaking as he said, "My son." He lifted the boy high, kissing his forehead, whispering blessings over him. To anyone watching, it was a holy moment. To me, it felt like I was standing in a lie too big to confess. In the weeks that followed, life shifted. Our home filled with visitors, family, friends, neighbors, all eager to see the baby. They brought clothes, food, advice, endless laughter. Everyone said the child looked like Michael. His father's eyes, they claimed, even his nose. I smiled politely, nodding, though inside I wondered if people only see what they want to see. Thank you for watching up till now. I hope you're enjoying the story. Please like, subscribe, and turn up notifications so you will know when I drop new videos. One afternoon, while rocking the baby to sleep, Michael's younger sister, Esther, leaned close to me and whispered, "You're lucky, you know. Not every man would dote on a wife the way my brother does." She chuckled softly, unaware her words cut me deeper than she intended. Lucky, yes. But did I deserve him? Months turned into years. Our son grew, his laughter echoing through the house. Michael was the perfect father, chasing him around the compound, teaching him to clap hands to old hymns. Watching them together was both beautiful and unbearable. Every time Michael called him my legacy, my stomach tightened. Then, not long after our boy turned 3, I discovered I was pregnant again. This time, there was no shadow of doubt. Michael was the father. I carried the pregnancy with less fear, though the guilt of the first child lingered like an uninvited guest in every corner of our lives. When our second child, a girl, was born, the atmosphere was different. I remember Michael's face when he first held her. He cried openly, kissing her tiny hands, whispering, "2 gifts, Lord. You have given me 2 gifts." It should have been a moment of pure joy, but even then, guilt laced itself into my joy. I wondered what it might feel like to tell him the truth, to confess the sin I had buried beneath layers of silence. But the words never came. How do you destroy a man who has built his world around trust? Life pressed forward. Between diapers, sleepless nights, and endless church activities, our days became busy. Sometimes, Michael and I would sit late into the night, drinking tea after the children had finally fallen asleep. He would talk about the future, schools, holidays, the house we hoped to build one day. I would nod, smile, contribute where I could. Yet beneath my smile, there was always the same quiet thought. One child is his, the other is not. One Sunday after service, while we were walking back to the car, an elderly woman from church stopped us. She admired the children, holding each of their hands. Then she said something that nearly made my knees buckle. Your boy, he doesn't look much like you, Michael. But children sometimes take after grandparents.
God is wonderful, Al.
She laughed, shaking her head. Michael laughed too, brushing it off.
But me?
I swallowed hard, the ground beneath me shifting. At night, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, I found myself staring at them in their beds. Two beautiful little souls. One born of love and betrayal, the other born of love and truth. And I couldn't help but wonder, how long could I keep balancing on this edge before it all came crashing down? It was an ordinary Tuesday when the thought stopped being a whisper and became a scream. For years, I had carried the truth like a stone in my chest. Now it refused to stay buried. I had to tell him, Daniel, the father of my first child. It had been almost 5 years since that night, 5 years since I convinced myself silence was safer. But every time I looked at my son, his curious eyes, the way he tilted his head when thinking, I saw pieces of Daniel staring back at me. And I knew I couldn't let him grow up without the truth, no matter how much destruction it would bring. I called Daniel late in the evening. My hands trembled as I held the phone, half praying he wouldn't answer. But he did, his voice calm, casual, as though he had been expecting me.
We need to talk, I said.
There was a pause. Then, when and where? The next day, I met him at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. He was already there, seated by the window, sipping black coffee, as if nothing in the world could unsettle him. But when his eyes met mine, I felt the years collapse again, pulling me back into memories I wished I could erase. You look the same, he said lightly. Marriage suits you. I forced a smile. Looks can deceive. He raised a brow, but I pressed on. If I hesitated, I would lose my nerve. Daniel, I need to tell you something. It's about my son. The word son made him straighten. Your son? Yes, I whispered. My voice cracked. He's yours. The silence that followed was suffocating. His coffee cup hovered halfway to his lips, then slowly lowered to the table. His face hardened, the easy charm slipping away like a mask. Mine. His voice was low, dangerous. What do you mean, mine? I swallowed hard. That night, before my wedding, the promise we made, I thought it was just closure. But I got pregnant. I told myself it could be Michael's, I prayed it was. But deep down I knew. He's yours, Daniel. He has your eyes, your smile.
He belongs to you.
The cafe suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in as his anger rose. You kept this from me for 5 years? His words were sharp, each syllable like a blade. You let another man raise my son? You let him call someone else father while I walked around clueless? I reached across the table, desperate. Daniel, I was afraid. I had just gotten married. Michael is a good man, a faithful man. I couldn't destroy him. I couldn't destroy us all. Daniel pushed my hand away, his jaw tight. So instead you destroyed me? You robbed me of my child, of 5 years I can never get back. Do you know what that feels like? Tears blurred my vision. People in the cafe glanced our way, sensing the tension, but I didn't care. This was years of silence breaking, years of guilt spilling into the open. I thought I was protecting everyone, I whispered. Protecting who? He snapped. Not me. Not him. You protected yourself. You didn't want to face the consequences of your choices, so you buried the truth and hoped it would rot quietly. But children don't rot quietly. They live, they breathe, they ask questions. And one day, he'll want to know who he really is. His words struck like thunder, and for once, I had no defense. He was right. Daniel leaned back, his eyes burning into me. Do you even understand what you've done? You've built your life on lies. And lies, no matter how well hidden, eventually collapse. I know, I whispered, my chest aching. That's why I came. I couldn't carry it anymore. He deserves to know. You deserve to know. I don't know what comes next. Daniel's fists clenched on the table. For a moment, I thought he might walk out and never return. But instead, he leaned forward, his voice steady but cold. What comes next, he repeated. What comes next is a storm. And I don't know who it will destroy first, you, your husband, or me. But make no mistake, Ada, this secret won't stay buried anymore. My breath caught. The weight I had carried for years was no longer mine alone. I had placed it in Daniel's hands, and I could already feel the ground shifting beneath us all. I should have known Daniel wouldn't stay silent. He was too proud, too wounded, too determined to reclaim what he believed was his. The confession had not ended at that cafe. It had merely begun. A week later, the storm broke. It was evening. Michael had just returned from work, tired but cheerful, humming softly as he set down his briefcase. The children were in their room, playing with blocks. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, when I heard the knock. Sharp, urgent. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there. His face was grim, jaw tight, eyes fixed on Michael behind me. What are you doing here? I hissed, panic rushing through me. I'm here for my son, he said, his voice hard. Then, without waiting for permission, he stepped inside. Michael looked up, startled. Daniel? What's this about? I tried to intervene, but Daniel's words cut through the air like glass. Michael, you've been raising a child that isn't yours. That boy, your first son, is mine. The room froze. Michael blinked, as though the words hadn't registered. Well, what did you just say? I dropped the ladle in my hand, my knees weak. Daniel, please. But Daniel pressed on, relentless. She never told you. She kept it from both of us. But the boy is mine. You've been living in a lie. Michael's face strained of color. His eyes darted between Daniel and me, disbelief twisting into something darker. Ada, is this true? My lips trembled. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't form. Tears blurred my vision, my silence answering for me. Michael staggered back, his hand gripping the edge of the table as though the ground beneath him had shifted. My God, he whispered. All these years. Daniel's tone softened, though it was no less firm. I deserve to know my son. He deserves to know me. But Michael wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on me, broken, accusing, searching for a reason to believe it wasn't real. The rest of that night was a blur. Daniel eventually left, his anger simmering, leaving behind a house that no longer felt like home. Michael didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't strike me. His silence was worse. For days, he refused to eat anything I cooked. He avoided me, retreating into prayer and solitude, his Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. At night, he lay on the far side of the bed, his back to me, while I wept quietly into my pillow. The children sensed the tension. Our daughter asked once, "Mommy, why is Daddy sad?" My throat tightened so much I couldn't answer. I begged. Morning after morning, I fell to my knees before him, confessing, pleading for forgiveness. "Michael, I was weak. I made a terrible mistake. But I love you. I love our family. Don't let this destroy us." He said nothing. A week passed. Then 2. The silence was unbearable. My body grew thin, my face hollow, but I didn't stop begging. Every prayer I prayed was laced with desperation. "God, touch his heart. Don't let him walk away." Finally, one evening, Michael spoke. His voice was low, trembling with pain. "Do you know what you've done to me, Ada? You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the covenant we made before God. I've carried another man's child as my own, called him my son, my legacy. And you watched me do it day after day." Tears streamed down my face. "I know, Michael. I know. And I'll regret it all my life. But I can't undo the past. All I can do is beg you to let me spend the rest of my life making it right." The silence stretched long. Then he sighed, deep and weary. "I don't know how to love you the same again. But I made a vow before God too. I will not break it. I will forgive you. But Ada, hear me." He lifted his eyes, wet with unshed tears. "Never again. If such a thing ever happens again, there will be no second chance." I nodded fiercely, clutching his hands as though they were the only thing keeping me alive. "Never again," I whispered. "Never." One mistake can indeed cost us a lot. Think carefully before taking some decisions. You might never get the chance to make things right again if it ever goes left. Thank you for watching. Please support the channel by liking and subscribing.